Hello there, my sleep fellows. Before we begin, if you enjoy gentle magical journeys like this one, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another cozy Hogwarts story. Now, let's slowly step into tonight's tale together. It is said that Hogwarts never truly sleeps, not in the way ordinary places do. Even when the corridors fall quiet, when footsteps fade and voices soften into whispers, the castle continues to breathe in its own quiet rhythm. Old stones remember, portraits murmur in dreams, and somewhere deep within its walls, magic lingers, not loud or dazzling, but soft, patient, and waiting. Tonight's story begins on one of those still nights. The sky above Hogwarts stretches wide and clear, painted in deep shades of midnight blue, where stars shimmer gently like distant lanterns. A cool hush settles over the castle grounds, wrapping towers and turrets in a calm silver glow. The Black Lake rests without, a ripple reflecting the quiet sky, while the forbidden forest stands motionless, as though even the trees have chosen to sleep. Inside the castle, the atmosphere is just as peaceful. The corridors are dimly lit by floating candles that drift lazily near the ceilings, their golden light flickering in a slow and steady rhythm. Shadows stretch softly across the ancient stone floors, shifting ever so slightly as the candles move. The usual chatter of students has long faded, replaced by a deep, comforting silence that feels almost like a lullaby. Somewhere far above, in one of the older towers rarely visited by students, there hangs a bell. It is not a grand bell, nor one that announces feasts or classes. In fact, most students don't even know it exists. It hangs quietly in a small stone chamber, near the top of a narrow spiral staircase, untouched by time, its surface dulled by age and covered in a thin veil of dust. No ropes are tied to it, no mechanisms surround it. It simply rests. And yet, there is something about it. No one speaks of the bell in lessons. It is not mentioned in textbooks, nor pointed out during first-year tours. But sometimes, very rarely, students who wander too far, too late at night, claim they hear something. Not a loud sound, not even a clear ringing, just a single soft note. A bell that rings once at midnight, and then never again. Most dismiss it as imagination. After all, Hogwarts is filled with moving staircases, whispering walls, and portraits that talk back. A quiet sound in the night is hardly something unusual, and yet, those who have heard it often describe the same feeling, a strange calm, like the world has paused for just a moment, as if time itself had taken a breath. Tonight, the castle feels especially still. The Gryffindor common room glows warmly, but even there, the fire has softened into gentle embers. A few students remain awake, their voices low, their movements slow. Elsewhere, in Ravenclaw Tower, candles flicker beside half-finished books. In Hufflepuff's cozy corner, soft snores mingle with the faint rustle of blankets. And deep beneath, in the dungeons, even the chill air feels unusually quiet. Everything is at rest. And yet, somewhere high above, Beyond the familiar paths and well-worn corridors, the old tower waits. The narrow staircase leading to it spirals upward in silence, its steps worn smooth by centuries of use, though few now climb them. The walls here are colder, older somehow, as if they belong to a different time. Small, arched windows allow thin streams of moonlight to slip inside, painting pale shapes along the stone. At the top of these steps lies the chamber, and within it, the bell. It does not move. It does not glow. It does not hum with visible magic. But tonight, something is different. The air around it feels just a little more alive, as though the silence itself is listening. A faint stillness settles deeper than before, not empty, but full, like the moment just before something begins. Midnight is approaching, and somewhere within the castle, though no one quite realizes it yet, a quiet moment is drawing near, a moment so small it could easily be missed, and yet so meaningful that it will leave a gentle mark on those who experience it. Because this is not a story of danger or urgency, it is a story of noticing, of listening, of being present in a world that is often too busy to hear its own quiet magic. As the clock hands slowly inch toward midnight, the castle seems to hold its breath. The candles flicker a little softer. The air grows just a touch cooler. Even the distant sounds of the night, rustling leaves, shifting stones, the quiet creak of ancient wood, begin to fade, and then, for just a single moment, the bell will ring, not loudly, not sharply, but gently, like a whisper carried through time, and only those who are truly still, truly present, will hear it. So as you settle in, letting your thoughts slow and your body relax, imagine yourself there, walking softly through those quiet corridors, feeling the warmth of candlelight, the cool touch of stone beneath your fingertips. Because tonight, you are not just listening to this story, you are part of it, and somewhere, high above, the silent bell waits, ready to ring just once, at midnight. As the castle rests in its quiet rhythm, there are still a few who remain gently awake, not out of restlessness, but simply because Hogwarts, in its calmest hours, has a way of inviting quiet thoughts. In the Gryffindor common room, beneath the soft glow of the fire, sits Harry Potter, leaning back into a well-worn armchair, his book resting loosely in his hands. His eyes move across the page, but not with urgency, more like someone letting words drift past, enjoying the stillness more than the story itself. There is a softness to his expression tonight, a quiet ease that only comes when the world slows down. Across from him, curled comfortably with a blanket draped over her shoulders, is Hermione Granger. A small stack of books rests beside her, though she is not actively reading. Instead, she traces a finger along the edge of a page, lost in her own thoughts, as if even her usually busy mind has decided to take a gentle pause. "Harry," she says softly, her voice calm and unhurried, "have you ever noticed how different Hogwarts feels at night?" Harry lowers his book slightly, considering the question with a faint smile. "Yeah, it's like everything's still there, but quieter, like the castle's thinking." Hermione nods, her eyes lifting toward the flickering light above. Exactly. It's not empty, just calmer, almost like it's waiting. Nearby, stretched out on the rug with his hands behind his head, Ron Weasley lets out a soft, sleepy sigh. I think it's just because no one's dragging us to class, he mutters, though there's a quiet amusement in his tone. Harry chuckles gently, the sound barely louder than the crackle of the fire. Maybe, but it does feel different tonight. There's a brief silence after that, but it isn't uncomfortable. It's the kind of silence that settles naturally between friends, warm and easy, like a shared understanding without needing words. Hermione closes her book softly, resting it on the table beside her. I read something once, she says, her voice thoughtful, about parts of Hogwarts that people forget, not because they're hidden, but because they're quiet, places that only feel noticeable when everything else slows down. Ron shifts slightly, turning his head toward her. Forgotten places sounds like the sort of thing Fred and George would have turned into a joke shop. Hermione smiles faintly. Not everything has to be loud to be magical. Harry glances toward the window, where the night stretches wide and calm beyond the glass. Something about her words lingers with him, a quiet curiosity, not urgent, but gently pulling at his attention. Do you think there are things in Hogwarts we've never really noticed? He asks. Hermione's answer comes easily, as if she's been thinking it all along. I think there are things that only reveal themselves when we're not trying too hard to find them. Ron lets out another soft sigh, though this time there's a hint of agreement in it. Well, if anything's going to reveal itself, I hope it waits till morning. Harry smiles again, but his gaze drifts slightly, thoughtful now. There's no rush in his expression, just a quiet awareness, like someone beginning to notice the world in a new way. Outside the common room, the castle continues its gentle stillness. Footsteps have long faded, and even the portraits seem to have settled into a peaceful hush. Somewhere, far beyond their awareness, the narrow staircase to the old tower stands silent, waiting. Back inside, the fire burns lower, its warmth steady and comforting. Hermione adjusts her blanket slightly. Ron's breathing begins to slow as he drifts closer to sleep. And Harry, he simply sits there for a moment longer, listening. Not for anything specific, just listening. Because sometimes, in a place like Hogwarts, the most important moments don't arrive with noise or excitement. They arrive quietly, and only those who are calm enough notice them. The night deepens gently over Hogwarts, wrapping the castle in a calm, silvery stillness that feels almost alive in its quietness. The corridors beyond the Gryffindor common room have long since emptied, leaving behind only the faint glow of lanterns and the soft, echoing hush that settles into ancient stone when the world begins to rest. Inside, the fire burns lower now, its warm light dancing lazily across the walls. Harry Potter closes his book at last, not because he has finished it, but because something else, something quieter, has begun to take his attention. It is not a sound, not exactly, more like the absence of one, a stillness that feels just a little deeper than usual. He glances toward the window where the night sky stretches wide and calm, stars scattered like distant lanterns. For a moment, he simply sits there, listening to the rhythm of the room, the soft crackle of the fire, the faint rustle of pages as Hermione Granger adjusts her book, and the slow, steady breathing of Ron Weasley, who has nearly drifted off to sleep. And then, something changes. It is so subtle that Harry almost misses it. A single, gentle tone, not loud, not sharp, just clear. A bell. Harry's head lifts slightly, his expression thoughtful rather than alarmed. The sound does not echo through the castle like a normal bell would. Instead, it seems to settle into the air itself, soft and contained, as though it belongs only to the moment it was heard. Hermione's eyes lift at the same time, her gaze moving slowly toward Harry. "Did you hear that?" Harry nods quietly. "Yeah, it wasn't loud, but it felt close." Ron stirs slightly, opening one eye with a sleepy expression. "Hear what?" he murmurs. Before either of them can answer, the sound fades completely, leaving behind a silence that feels just a little different than before. Not empty, just aware. Hermione closes her book gently, setting it aside. "That wasn't one of the castle bells," she says softly. "They don't sound like that." Harry leans forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. It didn't sound like it came from outside either. There is no urgency in their voices, no rush, just curiosity, the kind that unfolds slowly, like pages turning in a quiet room. Ron pushes himself up a little, rubbing his eyes. "Maybe it was Peeves," he suggests lazily. Hermione shakes her head, her expression thoughtful. "Peeves doesn't do subtle." A faint smile touches Harry's face at that, but his attention remains on the feeling left behind by the sound. It lingers in the air, not as an echo, but as a memory, as if the castle itself has noticed something. "Where do you think it came from?" he asks. Hermione pauses, considering. "Somewhere higher, I think. It didn't travel like a normal sound. It felt like it was already here." That idea settles between them, quiet and intriguing. Harry stands slowly, not out of urgency, but because something within him feels gently drawn to the question. "I might go take a look," he says, his voice calm. Ron groans softly, pulling the blanket closer around himself. At this hour, Hermione watches Harry for a moment, then nods. "I'll come with you." Ron hesitates, then lets out a soft sigh. "Fine. But if this turns into a whole adventure, I'm blaming both of you." There's a warmth to the moment, a quiet familiarity in the way they move together, even at this late hour. Harry picks up his wand, not in readiness, but simply out of habit, the familiar weight of it comforting in his hand. They step out of the common room into the corridor beyond, where the air feels cooler and the silence deeper. The castle at night is different, not empty, but restful, like something breathing slowly in sleep. Their footsteps are soft as they walk, echoing gently against the stone. For a while, there is nothing unusual, just corridors stretching quietly, portraits dozing in their frames, and the distant hum of the castle settling into itself. Then, it happens again. A second bell, just as soft, just as clear. This time, it feels slightly closer. Harry pauses mid-step, his head turning slightly, as though listening not just with his ears, but with something deeper. Hermione's voice is barely above a whisper. That definitely came from above us. Ron blinks slowly. All right, now I heard it. There is still no fear in the moment, only curiosity and a quiet sense of wonder. Harry looks toward the staircase ahead, the one that spirals upward into less traveled parts of the castle. It's coming from somewhere up there. Hermione nods slowly. There are towers and rooms we've never really explored at night. Ron glances up the staircase, then back at them. You both realize this is exactly how strange things start, right? Harry smiles faintly. Yeah, but this doesn't feel strange in a bad way. And that is true. There is something about the bell that feels gentle, like an invitation rather than a warning. They begin to climb. Each step is unhurried, the rhythm of their movement steady and calm. The air grows slightly cooler as they ascend, and the lanterns along the walls flicker with a softer glow. As they move higher, the castle changes subtly. The corridors grow narrower, the ceilings lower, the sounds of the lower floors fade completely, replaced by a deeper, more complete silence. And then, something else begins to happen. The portraits here are different, older, quieter. Some of them seem to be asleep, their figures barely moving, while others watch with calm, thoughtful expressions, as though they are aware of something the students are only just beginning to notice. Hermione slows slightly, her gaze moving across the walls. I don't remember this part of the castle being this still. Harry nods faintly. It feels like we've stepped into a place that doesn't get disturbed very often. Ron glances around, his earlier sleepiness replaced with a quiet attentiveness. It's not creepy, just quiet. They continue upward, their footsteps softer now, almost instinctively careful. Then, at the top of the staircase, they reach a small landing. There is a door there, simple, old, unmarked. Harry stops in front of it, his hand hovering slightly, not touching it yet. Hermione steps closer, her voice soft. Do you think it's coming from inside? Before Harry can answer, the bell rings again. This time, it feels closest of all, not loud, not sharp, just present. The sound does not echo outward. Instead, it seems to settle gently into the space around them, as though it belongs to this place, to this moment, and nowhere else. Ron lets out a slow breath. All right, now that definitely came from behind that door. Harry nods slightly, his expression calm, thoughtful. Yeah. But he doesn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he listens. Because the feeling that lingers after the bell is not one of urgency. It is one of patience, of something that has been waiting, not to be discovered quickly, but to be noticed slowly. Hermione rests her hand lightly against the wall beside the door, her eyes thoughtful. It doesn't feel like it wants to be rushed. Harry glances at her, then back at the door. No, it doesn't. For a moment, all three of them simply stand there, in the quiet, dimly lit landing, surrounded by the gentle stillness of the castle. The bell does not ring again, but its presence remains, soft, calm, patient, as though whatever lies beyond the door is not calling them forward with urgency, but waiting for them to be ready to understand it. And in that quiet pause, something shifts, not in the castle, not in the door, but in them. Because now, they are no longer just walking through Hogwarts, they are listening to it. And Hogwarts, in its quietest hours, has begun to speak. The quiet settles even deeper around them, as though the castle itself is holding its breath, not in tension, but in a calm, patient awareness. The small landing at the top of the staircase feels untouched by time, its stone walls softened by age, its lantern casting a steady, golden glow that never flickers too brightly. For a long moment, none of them move. Harry Potter stands closest to the door, his hand still hovering slightly before it, not hesitant, but thoughtful. Beside him, Hermione Granger watches the door with quiet focus, her curiosity unfolding slowly, while Ron Weasley lingers just behind them, alert now, though still wrapped in the gentle calm of the moment. "It's strange," Hermione whispers softly. "It doesn't feel like a locked room. It feels like a waiting one." Harry nods faintly. That is exactly it. Not hidden, not guarded, just waiting. He lowers his hand slightly, then gently places it against the door. The wood is cool beneath his fingers, but not cold. There is a stillness to it, a kind of quiet presence, as though the door has been here for far longer than anyone remembers, holding something not forgotten, but simply unvisited. He pushes it open. There is no creak, no resistance. The door moves smoothly, almost silently, revealing a small room beyond. At first glance, it appears simple, empty even, but as they step inside, something subtle begins to change. The air feels different, not heavier, not lighter, just softer, as though the space itself has a gentler rhythm than the rest of the castle. The room is circular, its stone walls curving gently around them. There are no desks, no shelves filled with books, no obvious purpose to the space at all. Only a single tall window, narrow and arched, allowing pale moonlight to spill quietly across the floor. And in the center, there is a bell. It rests on a low, round pedestal, no larger than a small table. It is not grand or ornate. In fact, it looks almost ordinary, crafted from a pale, silvery metal that catches the moonlight softly, giving it a faint, gentle glow. Ron blinks slowly. "That's it?" Hermione steps closer, her eyes fixed on the bell. "That's not just any bell." Harry doesn't speak. He simply watches it, feeling that same quiet presence he sensed before. Now clearer, closer, the bell does not move. It does not ring. It simply rests there, as though it belongs to a moment that has already happened, or one that is yet to come. Hermione circles it slowly, her footsteps soft against the stone floor. "There's no striker," she murmurs, "no mechanism, nothing that would make it ring." Ron folds his arms loosely. "So, it rings on its own?" Hermione pauses, her gaze thoughtful. Maybe not on its own. Harry tilts his head slightly. Then what makes it ring? There is no immediate answer, only silence. But this silence is not empty. It feels attentive, as though the room itself is listening to them now. Hermione takes a slow breath. What if it's not meant to be triggered by touch or movement? Ron raises an eyebrow. Then what? Thoughts? Hermione doesn't dismiss the idea. Maybe not thoughts exactly, but something close. Harry steps a little nearer to the bell, his gaze steady. He doesn't reach out to touch it. Instead, he simply stands there, allowing the quiet of the room to settle around him. The moonlight shifts slightly as a cloud drifts past the sky outside, softening the glow that fills the room. And then, something happens. The light inside the room changes, not suddenly, not dramatically, just gently. The shadows along the walls begin to move, not like flickering firelight, but like something slower, more deliberate. They stretch and soften, forming shapes that are not quite solid, not quite imagined. Ron straightens slightly. Do you see that? Hermione nods, her voice hushed. Yes. Harry doesn't speak, because he understands. The room is not showing them something new. It is revealing something that has always been there, just unseen. The shadows shift again, and now they begin to take clearer form. Not figures, not exactly, more like impressions. Moments, faint echoes of people who once stood here. A student, perhaps, lingering by the window, gazing out at the night sky. Another, seated quietly on the floor, as though listening for something only they could hear. A third, standing near the bell, not touching it, just waiting. Ron's voice is barely more than a breath. Are those memories? Hermione watches closely, her expression soft with realization. Not memories exactly, more like traces. Harry's eyes remain on the bell, but he can feel the room around him now, alive in a quiet, gentle way. These are the people who heard it before, he says quietly. The idea settles into the space like a soft echo. Hermione nods slowly. That makes sense. The bell doesn't call everyone, only those who notice it. Ron glances around again, his earlier uncertainty replaced with something calmer. So this room, it's not abandoned, it's just waiting for the right moment. The shadows continue to move, slow and steady, never overwhelming, never unsettling. They do not demand attention, they simply exist, like quiet reminders of those who came before. And then, the bell rings again. This time, it happens while they are inside the room. The sound is the same, soft, clear, gentle, but now it feels different, closer, deeper, as though it is not just heard, but understood. The shadows pause, the room stills, and for a brief moment, everything feels perfectly aligned. Harry closes his eyes, just for a second, letting the sound settle within him. It does not startle him. It does not confuse him. It simply feels right. When he opens his eyes again, the shadows have changed. They are no longer just traces of others. They are responding, shifting slightly toward him, toward them, as though acknowledging their presence. Hermione notices it too. It's reacting to us. Ron exhales softly. That's actually kind of nice. Harry looks at the bell again, his voice calm. I don't think it's showing us the past. Hermione tilts her head. Then what is it showing? Harry considers for a moment, then answers, gently. It's showing us who took the time to listen. The idea settles into the room, fitting perfectly, because that's what this place is. Not a secret hidden behind spells. Not a mystery meant to be solved, but a space that reveals itself only to those who slow down, who notice, who listen. The bell does not ring to announce to something important. It rings to be noticed. The room does not hold answers. It holds quiet moments. And the people who find it are not chosen by justice, but by their willingness to pause. The moonlight returns to its steady glow as the cloud passes and the shadows soften once more, becoming less defined, less visible, but not gone, just resting. Hermione lets out a soft breath. I think I understand now. Ron nods slowly. Yeah, it's not trying to tell us anything loud. Harry smiles faintly. No, it's just reminding us something quiet. They stand there for a while longer, not speaking, not moving much at all, because now there is nothing left to chase, nothing to figure out quickly, only something to feel slowly. And as the room settles once more into its gentle stillness, the bell remains at the center, silent again, but no longer unnoticed. They remain in that quiet room for a little longer than they realize, not because they are trying to solve anything quickly, but because the stillness itself feels like part of the discovery. The bell sits at the center on its low pedestal, its pale metal catching the moonlight in a soft, patient glow, like something that has learned to wait without ever becoming lonely. The air around it stays gentle and clear, and the stone walls seem to hold their own kind of calm, like a deep breath that has been slowly taken and never rushed back out again. Hermione is the first to shift, but even that movement is careful, as though she doesn't want to disturb the room's quiet agreement with the night. She walks a slow circle around the pedestal again, not hunting for hidden switches or clever charms, but watching the way the moonlight drifts across the bell's surface. Ron leans lightly against the wall near the door, his arms folded, his expression somewhere between sleepy and fascinated, as though he doesn't want to admit he's impressed, but can't help it. Harry stands closest, his attention on the bell, not because he thinks it will ring again, but because he can't shake the feeling that it already has, and that the sound is still there in some invisible way, like the memory of a note in the air after a song. Hermione finally speaks, her voice low and warm. I keep thinking it should have an inscription. Harry glances at her. Maybe it doesn't need one. Ron's mouth twitches. Everything needs an inscription. Otherwise, it's just a fancy lump of metal. Hermione gives him a look, but it's softened by the calm of the moment. You know what I mean. Most objects at Hogwarts that are meant to be found, they leave something behind. A hint, a phrase, a name. Harry's gaze returns to the bell. Maybe it wasn't meant to be found the usual way. That thought sits with them, gentle and steady. Hermione lowers herself carefully to the floor sitting cross-legged a short distance from the pedestal, her posture relaxed rather than tense. It looks almost natural in this room, as if students have always sat like this here, quiet, thoughtful, listening. Ron watches her, then sinks down too, back against the wall, legs stretched out, as though he's decided that if this is going to be strange, it might as well be comfortable. Harry remains standing for a moment longer, then slowly sits as well, not far from Hermione. The three of them are quiet now, and it's in that quiet that something begins to unfold. Not a sudden new sound, not another bell, but a feeling. It starts like the faintest shift in temperature, barely noticeable at first, like the room has leaned a fraction closer to them. Harry becomes aware of the space behind him, the curve of the wall, the door at their backs. Hermione's breathing slows, as if she's sensing it too. Ron's eyes drift half shut, but not with sleep, more like he's listening the way Harry is listening. And then, without any sharpness at all, the moonlight across the floor changes. It doesn't brighten or dim, it simply slides, as though the light itself has remembered something. A narrow band of moonlight stretches toward the far wall, and Harry notices, just at the edge of it, something he didn't see before. A faint line on the stone, not a crack, not damage, more like a seam, perfectly smooth, perfectly deliberate. Hermione notices it too, and her eyes widen slightly, not with alarm, but with that familiar, careful wonder she gets when something quietly proves her right. "There," she whispers. "Harry, do you see that?" Harry nods. "A seam." Ron lifts his head, squinting. "That's a seam. Looks like normal wall." Hermione's voice remains soft. "No, it's too clean. Hogwarts walls don't do too clean unless they mean to." Harry stands, slowly and quietly, and approaches the far wall. The seam is narrow, almost invisible, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. It curves upward slightly, tracing a shape that feels intentional, like the outline of a door that doesn't want to be noticed by hurried eyes. Harry doesn't touch it right away. He just looks. Then he raises his wand, not as a weapon, not as a threat, just as a familiar tool, like a candle in a dark room. Hermione stands too, stepping beside him. "Try something gentle," she murmurs. "Not a blasting curse, not a lock-opening charm, something softer." Ron stands a moment later, though he keeps a little distance, like he wants to be involved without being the first one blamed if something goes odd. Harry takes a slow breath, then says quietly, "Lumos." The wand tip glows, not bright, but steady. The light doesn't flood the room. It simply adds a warm point of clarity, like a small hearth fire carried in the hand. And as the wand light falls over the seam, the stone responds, not by moving, not by rumbling, but by revealing. A faint pattern appears, almost like frost on glass. It spreads gently over the seam in thin, silvery lines, forming something like musical staff lines, swirling into a delicate shape that looks almost like a bell turned sideways. There's no writing, no obvious instruction, just an image that seems to hum with quiet meaning. Hermione's face softens into recognition. It's responding to light, not to force. Ron leans in a little, careful. So what do we do? Sing at it? Hermione gives a tiny smile. Maybe not sing. Harry watches the pattern. The lines don't shimmer loudly. They just wait. Then, very softly, the bell behind them rings once again. Not sharply, not loudly, just a gentle note, clear as a breath. And the moment that sound touches the air, the pattern on the wall shifts. The staff lines separate, sliding apart like curtains being gently drawn. The seam brightens faintly, and the stone, without any creaking, without any show, opens inward by a few inches, as if it has been waiting for the bell's permission more than anyone's wand. Ron's eyebrows rise. All right, that's actually brilliant. Hermione's voice is hushed. It's connected, the bell and the door. Harry doesn't rush. He moves closer, and with the same slow care as before, he places his hand against the edge of the stone. It feels smooth, almost warm now, as though the wall has become less like rock and more like something living and willing. He eases it open. Beyond is not a corridor, not a staircase, not a hidden chamber filled with treasure or danger. It's something far quieter. A narrow alcove, shaped like a small chapel of stone. Inside, set into the wall, is a shallow shelf, and on that shelf rests a single object, a small book, not thick, not dramatic, no jeweled cover, just a modest volume bound in dark blue leather, with corners worn soft as if many hands have held it gently. It looks like the kind of book that belongs in a classroom, except it feels older, more private. Hermione steps forward, her eyes bright with careful curiosity. It's not hidden by spells, it's hidden by timing. Ron peers over her shoulder. What's it called? Harry looks at the cover. There's no title, but as the moonlight and wand light touch it together, faint lettering appears, as if waking from sleep. Not large, not flashy, just simple words. The listening register. Hermione exhales softly, as if the name alone has explained the room. A register. Ron frowns. For what? People who heard the bell? Harry doesn't answer yet. He reaches toward the book, then pauses, looking at Hermione as if asking without speaking, "Is this all right?" Hermione nods slowly. If it's here, it wants to be opened gently. Harry lifts the book from the shelf. It's lighter than he expects. The leather is warm, as if it's been waiting in the same way the bell has been waiting, patient, quiet, ready. He opens it. The pages are not blank, but they aren't filled in the usual way either. There's no ink that looks fresh, no scratched quill marks. Instead, each name appears faintly, like writing seen through mist, present, but soft. Harry's eyes move down the page. Names. Not only students, some professors. Some names Harry recognizes immediately. Minerva McGonagall, Pomona Sprout, Phileas Flitwick, written with the same quiet clarity as if the book has remembered them rather than recorded them. Ron's voice lowers, his usual humor softened by the strangeness of how gentle this feels. Flitwick. He's on there. Hermione leans closer. So are other professors, which means this isn't a student prank. Harry turns a page carefully. More names, some unfamiliar, older ones, names that feel like they belong to Hogwarts history more than the present day. They're listed under dates, but the dates are strange too. They're written not as numbers, but as descriptions. The first snow that fell without sound. The night the lake refused to ripple. The evening the candles leaned toward one table. Hermione's face is calm, but her eyes are full of wonder. It's not marking days, it's marking moments. Ron shifts his weight, unsettled in the gentlest way. Moments of what? Harry turns another page, and there it is again, written in that same faint, sleeping ink. The midnight bell. Under it, a short list of names. Not many, a handful spaced out across time, and then a blank space at the bottom of the list, as if waiting. Hermione's voice is barely a whisper. It's leaving room for new names. Ron looks between them. You mean ours? Harry doesn't answer immediately. He simply holds the book, feeling its quiet weight. It doesn't feel like a trap. It doesn't feel like a test designed to frighten them. It feels like an invitation to belong to something small and calm and hidden in plain sight. And then, in the same slow, gentle way the letters appeared on the cover, new ink begins to form at the bottom of the page. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. 3 names, blooming into clarity like stars appearing through thin cloud. Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley. Ron lets out a slow breath. Okay, that's actually a bit unsettling. Hermione turns her head toward him, her expression soft. Not unsettling like danger. Unsettling like being noticed. Harry closes the book slowly, holding it close for a moment, as if to thank it without words. The wall alcove remains open behind them, the bell resting at the center of the room, quiet now. But the suspense, the gentle kind, has deepened because now they know this isn't just a bell that rings once at midnight. It is part of something older, something that remembers, something that waits for people who are willing to slow down enough to hear it. And as they stand there in the moonlit room, with the register warm in Harry's hands, a new question settles softly into the quiet. If Hogwarts has been keeping track of those who hear the midnight bell, then what exactly does it want them to do next? The quiet discovery settles around them like a soft layer of snowfall, not cold, but gentle, something that encourages stillness rather than movement. The small book rests in Harry's hands for a moment longer, its warmth steady and reassuring, as though it recognizes him not as a stranger, but as someone who has simply arrived at the right time. Hermione is the first to speak again, though her voice remains low, respectful of the room and everything it seems to hold. We should think carefully about what this means, she says, not with urgency, but with thoughtful calm. If the register only appears when the bell rings, and the bell only rings once, then this isn't something meant to be visited often. Ron exhales slowly, glancing between the bell, the open alcove, and the book in Harry's hands. So what, you think we've just Stumbled into something that most people never even realize exists? Hermione nods faintly. Not stumbled, not exactly. It feels more like we listened long enough to notice. Harry turns the book over gently, tracing the edge of its cover with his thumb. There is no lock, no clasp, no visible enchantment, keeping it closed or hidden, and yet it feels complete as it is, like it does not need protection because it chooses who can find it. He looks back toward the alcove. Do you think we're meant to leave it here? The question hangs softly in the air. Hermione steps closer again, peering into the alcove as if trying to understand not just what is there, but what is missing. I think, she says slowly, that whatever this place is, it's not about taking anything away from it. Ron shifts his weight. So we don't take the book, we don't mess with the bell, we just leave? Hermione glances at him, her expression kind but thoughtful. Maybe not just leave, maybe understand a little more before we do. Harry nods, and very carefully, he places the book back onto the shallow shelf. It settles there as if it belongs completely. No movement, no change, just a quiet return to its place. The moment the book touches the shelf, the faint silvery lines on the wall begin to soften again, as if the space is preparing to close itself once more. But this time, the alcove does not shut immediately. It remains open, as though allowing them one more chance to look. Harry steps back, giving the space room to breathe. For a few seconds, none of them speak. Then Ron tilts his head slightly. You know, it's strange. Hermione looks at him. What is? He gestures lightly around the room. All of this. It's hidden, sure, but not really. There's no trap, no warning, no keep out sign. It's just here. Hermione follows his gaze. Because it isn't meant to keep people away. It's meant to be unnoticed unless you're paying attention. Harry leans lightly against the cool stone wall, letting the quiet sink in. He realizes something then, not a sudden revelation, but a gentle understanding that settles slowly. It's not about finding it, he says softly. It's about being the kind of person who notices it. Ron gives a small, thoughtful nod. So, not me, usually. Hermione smiles just a little. You noticed tonight. Ron shrugs, but there's no embarrassment in it, just a quiet acceptance. Harry looks back at the bell. It hasn't moved, it hasn't changed, but somehow it feels different now, not mysterious in a distant way, but familiar in a calm, reassuring sense, like something that doesn't need to explain itself because it trusts that eventually someone will understand. He takes a slow step toward it. Hermione watches him, but she doesn't stop him. Ron raises an eyebrow. You're not going to ring it again, are you? Harry shakes his head slightly. I don't think it works like that. He reaches out, not to strike the bell, but simply to rest his hand lightly against its surface. The metal is cool, but not cold, smooth, but not lifeless. And for a moment, Harry closes his eyes, not to test anything, not to trigger a reaction, but simply to feel the quiet presence of it. Nothing dramatic happens. No sound, no light, just a sense that the bell is exactly where it is meant to be. Harry opens his eyes again and steps back. Hermione's voice is gentle. What did it feel like? Harry thinks for a moment, searching for the right words. Like it wasn't waiting for me to do anything, just to understand that it's there. Ron lets out a soft breath. That's surprisingly comforting. The alcove behind them begins to close slowly now, the seam drawing inward without a sound. The book disappears from view, not hidden, but simply returned to its quiet place. The wall becomes smooth again, unremarkable, as though nothing had ever been there at all. Hermione watches it carefully, then nods to herself. It's done. Harry glances at her. What is? She folds her arms loosely, her tone calm. It showed us what it needed to show us, no more, no less. Ron stretches slightly, his earlier tension completely gone now. So what do we do with that? Hermione's answer comes without hesitation. We don't do anything with it. Ron blinks. That's it? She smiles faintly. Some things aren't meant to be used. They're meant to be remembered. Harry looks toward the door, the same quiet wooden door they had entered through. It seems ordinary again now, just another part of the castle, and yet it feels different in the same way the bell does, familiar. He takes a step toward it, then pauses. What if it doesn't open again? Ron asks, only half joking. Harry glances back at him. Then I suppose we'll just have to stay here forever. Ron groans softly. Brilliant. At least, it's peaceful. Hermione gives a quiet laugh, the sound warm and light. Harry reaches for the handle and turns it. The door opens easily. Beyond it, the corridor stretches out in its usual quiet way. Stone floor, flickering torches, the faint echo of distant movement somewhere far away in the castle. Everything is as it should be. Harry steps through first, Hermione just behind him, and Ron follows, giving one last glance over his shoulder before the door swings closed. When it shuts, it makes no special sound, no click, no echo, just a soft, ordinary close. They stand there for a moment in the corridor, letting the transition settle. The castle feels the same, but they feel different within it, as if they are carrying a small, quiet secret that doesn't weigh them down, but instead makes the space around them feel a little softer. Ron rubs the back of his neck. So, do we tell anyone? Hermione considers this carefully. I don't think we need to. Harry nods slowly. It's not the kind of thing you explain. It's the kind of thing you find. Ron gives a small smile. Or don't find. Hermione glances down the corridor, then back at them. Either way, it will still be there. Harry follows her gaze, and for a brief moment, he imagines the room behind the wall, the bell resting quietly, the book waiting on its shelf, the space unchanged by their visit. Not because it has forgotten them, but because it doesn't need to hold on. And as they begin to walk away, their footsteps soft against the stone, there is no urgency, no rush to return to their dormitory or explain where they have been. Only a quiet understanding that some parts of Hogwarts are not meant to be explored with spells or searched with maps. Some parts are meant to be discovered slowly by those willing to listen, to pause, and to notice the smallest, gentlest details. And tonight, they made a choice not to take in anything from that place, not to change it, not to claim it, but simply to remember it. And somehow, that feels like exactly the right choice. The corridor feels quieter than it had before, though nothing about it has truly changed. The torches still flicker with their soft golden glow, and the distant hush of Hogwarts at night continues its gentle rhythm. Yet something within the three of them has shifted, not sharply, not in a way that startles, but in the same quiet manner that the castle itself seems to move, slowly, thoughtfully, almost as if it breathes. Harry walks a little more slowly now, his steps softer against the stone floor. Hermione stays close beside him, her expression thoughtful, her mind clearly turning over everything they have just experienced. Ron follows just behind, hands loosely in his pockets, but even he seems calmer than usual, as though the usual urge to question or joke has softened into something quieter. After a few moments, Hermione speaks. "Do you realize," she begins gently, "that nothing in that room tried to stop us, or guide us, or even react to us?" Ron glances up. "Yeah, I noticed that. No traps, no puzzles, no prove you're worthy sort of thing." Harry nods slightly, his gaze drifting along the corridor walls. "It didn't feel like it needed anything from us." Hermione's voice softens even more. "Exactly. It wasn't waiting to be solved." They walk a few more steps in silence, the idea settling between them. Then Harry pauses. Not suddenly, not in alarm, just a quiet halt, as though something has gently caught his attention. Hermione and Ron stop with him. "What is it?" Ron asks. Harry turns slightly, looking back down the corridor behind them, the direction they came from. The door is no longer visible. The wall looks exactly as it always has, uninterrupted and ordinary. But Harry doesn't seem confused. He seems thoughtful. "I think," he says slowly, choosing his words with care, "that the room wasn't about the bell, or the book, or even the hidden space." Hermione tilts her head, listening closely. "Then what was it about?" Harry takes a slow breath, his voice quiet but certain. "It was about paying attention." The words linger. Ron frowns slightly, not in disagreement, but in concentration. "You mean like noticing things other people don't?" Harry shakes his head gently. "Not just that. I mean, noticing without trying to change anything." Hermione's eyes soften, understanding beginning to take shape. "Observing, without interfering." Harry nods. They continue walking, slower still, as though the act of moving itself has become part of the thought. "The bell didn't need us to ring it again," Harry continues. "The book didn't need us to take it. The room didn't need us to figure it out." Ron exhales quietly. "So, it wasn't a mystery to solve." Hermione completes the thought. "It was something to experience." There is a long, gentle pause after that. The castle seems to listen. Harry's gaze lifts slightly, catching the flicker of torchlight dancing across the ceiling. "I think that's why it only appears when everything else is quiet." Ron glances around. "Because people aren't rushing past or trying to get somewhere?" Hermione nods faintly. because that's when people stop looking for something specific and start noticing what's already there. Harry smiles just a little, though it is not a bright or excited smile. It is soft, almost peaceful. And maybe that's why it doesn't stay open, he adds, because it's not meant to be something you keep going back to, like a secret passage or a hidden room. Ron raises an eyebrow. So it's a one-time thing? Harry considers this. Not exactly. I think it's always there, just not always seen. Hermione's voice is thoughtful, like the castle itself changes, depending on how you're looking at it. They slow again as the corridor opens slightly into a wider section where a tall window lets in the faint silver glow of the night sky. Moonlight spills across the floor in a soft pattern, illuminating the dust motes drifting gently in the air. Harry stops near the window. He looks out, not searching for anything, just observing for a moment. None of them speak. Then Ron breaks the silence, his voice quieter than usual. You know, I've walked through these corridors loads of times, never really thought about any of it. Hermione smiles softly. Most people don't. Ron glances at Harry, but tonight, it felt different. Harry nods, because we weren't trying to get somewhere. Hermione folds her arms lightly, leaning against the wall. We weren't thinking about what we needed to do next, or what we might find. We were just there. Ron lets out a small, thoughtful laugh. So all it takes to find hidden magical rooms is doing absolutely nothing? Harry chuckles quietly. Not nothing, just slowing down. The three of them fall into silence again, but it is not an empty silence. It is full in a quiet way, like the space between notes in a gentle melody. After a moment, Hermione speaks again, her voice almost a whisper. Do you think the room will appear again for someone else? Harry considers the question, his gaze still resting on the night beyond the window. I think it already has, he says softly, many times. Ron shifts slightly, and no one talks about it? Hermione answers this time. Maybe because there's nothing to explain. You can't really describe it properly. Harry turns from the window, looking back at his friends. It's not something you tell someone to go and find, he says. It's something they find when they're ready to notice it. Ron nods slowly, the idea settling into place. So it's not hidden, he says. It's just overlooked. Hermione smiles. Exactly. A soft breeze brushes against the window, barely noticeable, yet enough to stir the air just a little. The torchlight flickers again, shadows shifting gently along the walls. Harry takes a step back from the window. I think that's the whole point, he says, his voice calm and certain now. Hogwarts isn't just full of magic you can learn, or spells you can practice. Hermione listens closely. It's full of quiet magic, Harry continues, the kind you only notice when you stop looking for something else. Ron exhales softly. That's actually quite nice. Hermione's expression is warm. It is. They stand there for a moment longer, letting the understanding settle completely. No excitement, no rush, just a quiet clarity. And then, almost without needing to say it, they begin walking again, back toward their common room, back toward the familiar paths of the castle. but their steps are different now. Softer, slower, more aware. And as they move through the corridor, the castle seems to respond in its own quiet way, not by changing, not by revealing anything new, but simply by being there, steady and calm, waiting for those who are willing to notice it. The bell, the room, the hidden alcove, they fade gently into memory, not forgotten, but understood. And that understanding lingers with them, like the soft echo of a sound heard only once, yet remembered long after it has faded. The corridor slowly gives way to more familiar paths, and with each step, the quiet weight of the night begins to soften into something gentle and comforting. The castle no longer feels mysterious in the same way it had before. Instead, it feels like it always has, steady, ancient, and quietly alive in a way that does not demand attention, only appreciation. Harry, Ron, and Hermione walk together without urgency, their footsteps echoing softly along the stone floor. The flickering torches guide them forward, their warm light wrapping the corridor in a golden calm that feels almost like a quiet welcome back. For a while, none of them speak. It is not an awkward silence, nor one filled with questions. It is the kind of silence that comes after something meaningful has been understood, when words are no longer needed and simply being present is enough. Ron stretches his arms slightly as they walk, letting out a slow breath. "You know," he says quietly, "that might be the strangest thing we've ever come across, and that's saying something." Hermione lets out a soft laugh, though it is gentle, not amused in the usual way. "Strange, yes, but not unsettling." Harry nods. "No, it didn't feel like it wanted anything from us." Ron glances at him. "Yeah, that's what made it different." They turn a familiar corner, one that leads them closer to the heart of the castle, where the walls seem warmer, the air more lived in. The distant hum of Hogwarts, faint movements, shifting portraits, the quiet settling of a place that never truly sleeps, returns in subtle layers. Hermione slows slightly, her fingers brushing lightly against the stone wall as she walks. "I think," she says softly, "that some magic isn't meant to be used or studied." Ron raises an eyebrow. "Then what's it for?" She pauses for a moment before answering. "To remind us that not everything needs to be understood." Harry glances at her, thoughtful. "Or controlled." Hermione nods. They continue walking, their pace unhurried, their steps naturally falling into rhythm with one another. As they near a staircase, the castle creaks faintly, a quiet, familiar sound, like an old building settling into itself. The staircase shifts slightly, just enough to align with the path they need, as though it has been waiting patiently for them to arrive. Ron watches it move and smiles faintly. "That's more like it," he says, "the usual kind of strange." Harry chuckles softly, comforting in its own way. They climb the steps together, the gentle rise of the staircase adding to the slow unwinding of the night's events. Each step feels lighter than the last, as though whatever quiet weight they carried earlier has now been set down somewhere behind them, left not as something lost, but as something complete. At the top of the staircase, a long corridor stretches ahead, lined with familiar portraits. A few of the figures within them glance up as the trio passes, offering small nods or sleepy expressions, but no one speaks. Even the portraits seem to understand that this is not a moment for conversation. The castle feels settled. Hermione pulls her robe a little closer around herself, not from cold, but from comfort. "It's funny," she murmurs. "We didn't take anything with us." Ron looks at her, slightly confused. "What do you mean?" She gestures lightly, as if indicating the memory itself. "No object, no spell, nothing to show we were there." Harry's voice is soft. "We didn't need to." Ron considers this, then nods slowly. "Yeah, I suppose we didn't." They reach the final turn that leads toward their common room, the familiar surroundings now fully wrapping around them like a quiet embrace. The distant glow of warmer lights suggests rest, safety, and the gentle close of the day. Harry pauses for just a moment before the turn, not because something has caught his attention, but simply to take in the stillness one last time. He breathes in slowly, then lets it out, and in that quiet breath, there is no lingering question, no unresolved mystery, only a calm understanding that some things are not meant to be held onto tightly, but carried lightly, like a soft memory. Ron notices him pause. "You coming?" Harry nods, a small, peaceful smile on his face. "Yeah." They turn the corner together. The castle, behind them, remains just as it always was, unchanged, yet somehow richer for having been noticed. The corridors continue their quiet watch. The torches flicker gently, and somewhere far behind, unseen and untroubled, the hidden space returns to its patient stillness. Nothing calls out, nothing shifts, and yet the sense of it lingers, not as a mystery waiting to be solved, but as a quiet presence that exists whether it is seen or not. As Harry, Ron, and Hermione move toward rest, the night around them softens even further, settling into a calm that feels complete. And Hogwarts, in its endless, quiet way, simply continues, waiting for the next moment when someone, somewhere, might pause long enough to notice what has always been there. And now, as the night deepens around the ancient walls of Hogwarts, everything begins to grow a little quieter, a little softer, as though the castle itself is gently settling into rest. The corridors that once carried footsteps and whispers now hold only stillness, wrapped in the warm glow of fading torchlight. Somewhere far away, a door closes with a soft click. A portrait shifts in its frame and then becomes still again. Even the staircases, so often moving with quiet purpose, seem to pause, as if they too are ready to sleep. And you, dear listener, can feel that same calm beginning to settle within you. The story you have just followed does not end with a loud discovery or a grand conclusion. Instead, it rests gently, like a candle dimming slowly, leaving behind a soft and steady glow. The hidden places of the castle remain where they have always been, unchanged, patient, and at peace. Not every mystery needs to be solved. Not every door needs to be opened again. Some things exist simply to remind us that the world is wider, quieter, and kinder than we sometimes notice. As Harry, Ron, and Hermione drift into their own well-earned rest, the castle watches over them, as it always has, calm, protective, and endlessly gentle. And just like them, you too can allow yourself to rest now, knowing that everything is exactly as it should be. There is nothing more to search for tonight, no questions left waiting, only a soft stillness wrapping around you like a warm blanket. So take a slow breath in and let it out just as gently. Feel your thoughts quieting, like footsteps fading down a distant hallway. Feel the calm of this magical place settling around you, steady and reassuring. And as sleep begins to find you, imagine the castle resting too, its towers silhouetted against the night sky, its windows glowing faintly, its secrets safe and undisturbed. You are safe, you are calm, and just like Hogwarts, you can rest peacefully, knowing that everything you need is already within reach. Good night.